And now here with us to discuss the looming security threats facing Israel is Lt Col Maurice Hirsch of the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. Maurice, pleasure to have you on as always. Thank you so much for joining us. Israeli officials are now anticipating potentially a much bigger strike from Hezbollah in the north and not necessarily from the Islamic Republic. What is your take on this? Do you think that this is the path we're probably going to see in the coming weeks?
So at the moment, what appears to be the case is that the Iranians have decided to avoid a massive attack on Israel, going rather for a qualitative strike rather than a quantitative strike. The problem is now just with Hezbollah. And what do you do with Hezbollah? Hezbollah have their own dilemmas. We saw Hassan Nasrallah speaking just a few days ago, really expressing his frustration at the Lebanese people as to why they weren't more supporting Hezbollah's resistance, as he calls it, and their attacks on Israel, fearing obviously that Israel would respond in a massive way to any further Hezbollah escalation of the situation. And so now we're just waiting to see how Hassan Nasrallah will take that into account, what exactly his plan is going to be, what he's really cooking up for himself, in the understanding also that he doesn't necessarily have the full backing of his Iranian masters, as he appeared to have in the initial hours or days even after the strike against Fuad Shukar and against Ismail Haniyeh. So we're really seeing a developing situation on the ground.
Now, we see that the United States has also been quite desperately trying to discourage the regime in Iran from attacking Israel. Do you believe that such efforts can actually succeed? And if so, would it be because of the pressure from the West and other countries, or perhaps even because of the fact that there are over 10 IRGC commanders currently under investigation over the very assassination of Ismail Haniyeh?
I think the U.S. approach to Iran has often been erroneous, misunderstanding both their motivations and their driving forces. But I think there's something that both the US and Iran clearly understand, and that is that Israel's response to an attack wouldn't necessarily only be focused on the kinetic capabilities of Iran, not only attacking their rocket firing or missile firing capabilities, but rather targeting strategic assets. And that, I think, was one of the really most important messages that Israel conveyed to Iran, albeit indirectly, with its strike in Hodeidah against the Houthis, attacking an oil distillery, really setting it on fire, destroying their financial capabilities. And now there's been a lot of discussion about the Iranian Karaj Island, which is the source of 90% of their oil exports, and the understanding that this could potentially be a very real target for Israel. That would have tremendous repercussions on the Iranian economy, which is predominantly funded by their oil exports on the one hand, and also on the world economy, seeing such a large-scale attack on an oil refinery, and that's something that could have really much wider repercussions. So I think the U.S. is trying to persuade the Iranians the price that you're going to pay is not necessarily only going to be military, but also financial, and could really undermine the basis of Iran. And so you should really consider whether this is really the escapade that you want to start into.
Absolutely. We saw even the new president, Pezeshkian, who's by no means a supporter of Israel, has been trying to persuade the Ayatollah himself that perhaps this isn't the best path, and that could lead ultimately to the fall of the regime. So they should consider very, very closely how they want to move forward. Of course, there's also been this discussion of a preemptive strike by Israel. What does Israel stand to lose or to gain from such a move?
Well, so the question really facing Prime Minister Netanyahu at the moment is, who does he want to be? Does he want to be Levi Eshkol on the 4th of June 1967, who sees these really imminent threats to Israel's security and carries out that preemptive strike? Or does he want to be Golda Meir, who's sitting on the morning of Yom Kippur, had already heard all of the warnings that could possibly have been heard, but had waited for the attack to happen? This is something which Prime Minister Netanyahu and Israel in general has to consider. where is the imminent threat coming from? And is that something that we should conduct a preemptive strike or wait for our enemies to attack us before we respond?
Now, it seems that as of late, Israel's been very focused on targeted assassinations. Is this a strategy that could ultimately bring Israel victory in the battle against both the Islamic Republic and its proxies?
In short, no. We've seen that, unfortunately, the value of human life in the eyes of our enemies is very, very low. Every single one of these terrorists has his immediate replacement. Better capabilities, worse capabilities, but they don't seem to have that basic value for human life. So eliminating these senior terrorists is obviously something which causes a disruption for those enemies, but it's not something that long term can be seen as a goal which will really deter them or prevent them from continuing on with their aggression. Until you take out all of the Hezbollah capabilities, whether it's Shukar or whether it's Imad Mughniyeh or whether it's the next terrorist who will take their place, it doesn't really matter to them, unfortunately.
All right, well, we are out of time, but Lieutenant Colonel Maurice Hirsch, thank you so much for joining us today, as always.
Thank you very much for having me. Stay safe, everyone.